Good morning. Happy New Year. On today's episode of Morning Minutes, we're going to talk about the fastest way to grow the value of your commercial property. So stay tuned.
I'm the ringleader, so listen up.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Morning Minutes. Myself, Michael Burgio, talk episode 1582, and we're talking about the fastest way or ways to increase the value of your commercial property. I thought it was a good time to do it at the start of a new year, looking forward. Now, what we're going to go through in today's episode is one of the reasons why I love commercial property, especially compared to residential. A lot of the time with residential property, the value of your property is determined by how the overall market is going. And that's why the common asked question when a real estate agent or people around a barbecue is, how's the property market going? Because that owner knows if they say good, then typically they're making money, they've made money in their residential property, and there's not much they can do to really impact that price. Of course, you can make sure the presentation is amazing, new kitchens, new bathrooms, painting and carpet. But once you've done those value adds, what more can you really do? So that's why I love commercial property. And let's get into it. The number one way to increase the value of your commercial asset is increasing the lease terms and the rental amount for the commercial property. Not rocket science, but the higher, the more rent you get for your, say, shop, the higher the value of that price, of that potential sale price is. Now, for anyone who's bought commercial property, that would be a bit of a no-brainer. But if you're coming from the residential market where you're not really thinking about rental return or rental income, or if it's a good rent, you're like, great, pay less mortgage, or I'm kicking them out because I'm moving in anyway. But with commercial property, it is one of the most important things to know. It's one of the most commonly asked questions. The rental return is very significant. Now, and it can be as simple as, if you have a shop bringing in $50,000 a year income, let's put that at a 5% return, that's worth $1 million, and you can negotiate the rental increase to $60,000 a year. You're now got an asset worth $1.2 million. So overnight, you've increased the value of $200,000 for your asset, regardless of the market. If interest rates went up and down, you've had that increase. And I think one of the best case studies I've ever had, taking this into consideration, was we had an empty shop on Howard Avenue. The owners were about to do a deal for $700,000. I had a tenant who was eager to find a shop in DY. That ticked all the boxes. I said to the owners, can I bring this tenant through? And they're like, no, we only want to sell it. And I said, I understand, but if you allow me to get this tenant through, and if they take up the lease, we'll be able to sell it for significantly more. So they let me through. We showed the property. The tenant loved it. They put a very strong rental offer in. And long story short, I sold that shop 2 weeks later for $910,000. So for an asset that had been on the market for nearly a year, vacant, about to do a deal at $700,000 with a new tenant in place with a great rent, selling it for $910,000. And you can do that yourself if you own a commercial property. You can have that rental negotiations with your tenant. Now, I understand let's say you're already getting a strong rent for your property, and there's no way to move that rental position up. Another way to increase the value of your commercial property is the length of the lease on that property. So if I know I'm bringing, say, a shop to market with a lease that's only 1 or 2 years long, we would expect to sell that on a 7% return. So at that $50,000 income, let me get you that price. that's $700,000 that asset would sell for. But if I can negotiate a 5-year lease, a 10-year lease, we can sometimes see strata assets sell on a 5% yield with a long lease, and now your value is up to $1 million. So by not even changing the rent, but how long the lease is, you could have a $285,000 fluctuation on the price, which is massive. Now, a third option, if you can't change the rent, they won't do a longer lease. Also, the type of tenant can really impact the value of the property. From, I know before COVID, coffee shops, cafes, restaurants would be selling on some of the best yields and the most desired assets. But ever since COVID, there's been a bit of hesitancy to those businesses because I think a lot of people saw how quickly they closed, and there wasn't a lot of operators out there did not have a lot, weren't very successful. So the key tenancies I'm seeing, which investors are loving, are sort of lawyers, medical tenants. So even if you can't change the rent, the length of the lease, even having a different type of tenant in place can increase the value of your property. So there's the first one. The second point to increasing the value of your commercial property is the floor space. Now, as I covered in point 1, the rental yield is a big factor in the value of the property, but so is the floor area. So if you have, let's say, a warehouse that is 100 square meters, and that would sell for 10,000 square meter, $1 million. Now, if you have the opportunity to maybe build a mezzanine floor, adding 100 square meters of floor space, or you may have some more land out the back, you can build another 100 square meters, then you could effectively, let's use that example of a 100 square meter warehouse, and you've got, say you got 20 car spaces out back, or you could reduce that down to 6 car spaces and have a 200 square meter factory. A lot of the time when it comes to the ground floor square meterage for a warehouse, if you're going from 100 square meters to 200 square meters, you've doubled your price straight away there. When you're building additional floors like mezzanines, it's sometimes not the exact same as doubling the price. And the reason, because even though you're gaining floor space, you are losing height in that example. And there are a lot of businesses that would have a smaller floor space but would prefer height. So that's another big way of increasing the value of your commercial space, of your commercial property, the floor spacing. Now, just the third one before I wrap up. I'm running solo today, so don't have Mark to bounce some ideas off. But planning and zoning controls and approvals for your property. So let's say you can't increase the rent of your property, you can't increase the floor space of the existing building, but it's a freestanding property. You may be able to get an approval to build a second dwelling, or you may have an approval to build 3 stories on your block. You can get that zoning approval there as well. And a lot of the time, just having that DA approval, you can get an increase in potential pricing without doing any construction, because there's a lot of builders out there. They're busy, they don't have time. So if they can find a property which already has the approval on it and they can just come in and start building straight away, that's very, very desirable. So that's it for it today. If you have any questions, or you would like myself to do an analysis of your commercial property to see where you could potentially increase the value, either rent, square meterage, or planning controls, feel free to reach out to me anytime. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.